Brian Smith believes the Knights' solid start to the season should put his players in the selectors' line of sight. He says a strong performance against the Dragons could see players such as Houston, Patterson, De Gois and McManus join the likes of Cross, Mullen and Gidley in a representative jumper.
If McManus is not in line for some sort of selection this year, I'm not sure what more he'd have to do.
Injury concerns see Wes Nagama and Keith Lalia back in contention for a start against the Dragons, with Aku Uate again in doubt.
No, he hasn't been 100% ruled out yet, but he's most unlikely to play.
Meanwhile, Steve Simpson has suffered another injury setback.
We thought he might have been even a sneaky chance of playing this week, but now he's probably looking, it'll be great if we get him back for the West Tigers game.
In the boardroom, Knights management is looking at incentives to attract more fans, but the CEO says they're not concerned by crowd numbers so far.
I guess we're cautious, we're having a look at them. I think the proof will be our next couple of home games. If we can win on the road over these next couple and come back home, we'll see where the crowds are then.
If today's junior clinic is anything to go by, the Knights will have plenty of support in the future. Around 500 aspiring NRL players turned out for a clinic at Energy Australia Stadium, receiving tips from the first grade squad about what it takes to play at the highest level. The Targa Tasmania is no place for the faint-hearted. But Natalie Horn is not your average driver.
Been competing since I was 12, hill climb, super sprints, racing, Wakefield Park, Oran Park, Eastern Creek, and it's just progressed from there.
It's that experience which convinced her father Phil to offer Natalie a chance to compete at the world-famous event, after they both watched from the roadside last year.
I asked her whether she wanted to have a run. She said yes, of course. So it was then prepare the car for both of us. So 2 cars, one for her and one for me.
Today, Phil and Natalie were making final preparations for the long journey to the Apple Isle. Phil has been racing for more than 40 years, but he'll make his debut at this year's Targa. To add to the pressure, he's only driven with his navigator Peter Avery once.
New Zealand, he made a couple of boo-boos.
Making it a true family occasion, Peter's daughter will sit alongside Natalie as her navigator.
We haven't been at any events together. This is my first time with a navigator, so hopefully she'll get it right, not like a father.
The Targa begins on the 28th of April.
1,000 volunteers at the Greening Centre propagate 41,000 trees and plants every year for council, community giveaways and weekly sales. Now it's all in jeopardy.
Last night when I watched the news, I was absolutely devastated because we've been all through this before.
It costs about $550,000 a year to run, but much of that is spent on 7 staff. They'll be redeployed within council, leaving a saving of just $70,000 after closing it down. The volunteers have concerns it's a land grab, believing the Katara site would be very valuable.
We had our 10th birthday party down here about 2 weeks ago, and our Lord Mayor came in and visited us. And he told us what a wonderful job we were doing.
The Lord Mayor says he hadn't seen the sustainability report at that time. It's a similar story at Blackbutt, where the animal exhibits are under threat.
To think it'll come up again after it's been discussed so many times is really, really disappointing.
And the reaction from hunter tourism.
Blackbutt is also a great asset for Newcastle, and we find a lot of our cruise ship passengers that come in, that's one of the biggest tours that they do. So we'd certainly like to see Blackbutt continue.
People come from overseas like us. We want to see kangaroo and koala.
As for targeting visitor parking at beaches,
not having the parking fees is what sets us apart from other destinations.
Volunteers from the Greening Centre and Blackbutt claim the General Manager Lindy Hyam hasn't been to either site, but Council argues that's irrelevant.
And it would be a great idea if they're going to shut us down, why don't they come out here and have a look at us? See the work we're doing.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
It was the moment Alan Dunbar and his wife Margaret never thought would arrive. The return of Alan's father John's war medals. In May last year, the 4 World War I and 3 World War II medals were stolen from the couple's Adamstown home, and while a 25-year-old man was convicted of the crime last July, it seemed the beloved medals had vanished. That was until the man in possession of them was recently overcome by the spirit of Anzac Day.
Last night a gentleman contacted police and explained that he had some medals that didn't belong to him and he wanted to do the right thing.
The Dunbars couldn't be more grateful.
I'm sure that my father would have been very happy to have seen this.
To mark their return, they'll be on full display this Anzac Day.
Absolutely, I would be able to wear these medals for him.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
After Nancy Bird Walton's death in January, friends of the museum will converge on the Luscantire airstrip tomorrow to unveil plans to build a memorial observation tower honouring Australia's First Lady of the Skies.
And it'll be in the 1930s style, and she used to come here flying a lot, and so we'll always remember her, you know. She'll always be looking over us, so to speak.
Construction on the tower will start mid-year, but this weekend will include a much more personal tribute for Nancy's family. On Sunday, 3 of these tiger moths will fly in formation to Kew near Port Macquarie, where her remains will be scattered from the sky.
And that's where she requested to have her ashes spread, and we're honoured to be asked to by the family to do it.
And that's not all. The group hopes to hold an annual fly past to recognise Nancy's achievements and make sure her legacy lives on.
We also intend to do other things to remember Nancy and encourage young women pilots to follow in the footsteps of Nancy and fly the old biplanes, and we're working towards that.
Penny Evans, NBN News.
Police say they're still no closer to understanding how 2 people died inside this Wallsend home. While the bodies are yet to be formally identified, they're believed to be 67-year-old Daphne Waite and her 49-year-old nephew Tony Willoughby. Autopsies were conducted today but only revealed tentative medical explanations. Detectives have ruled out foul play but are still investigating the circumstances surrounding the deaths. It's still not known exactly how long the pair had been dead before being discovered or who died first, but police say the bodies were in a state of decomposition. The incident has prompted officers to once again ask people to keep an eye on their elderly neighbours.
I think it's a perfect example of how important it is if you've got elderly or alone neighbours, people living on their own, that you always keep an eye out for them. If you haven't seen them for a couple of days, knock on the door, just check on their welfare.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
You know the song Those Magnificent Men in Their Flying Machines? Well, this is them going up, up, up and down, down, down. Paul Bennett is officially the best in the land after being crowned champion of champions at the Nationals in Parks. It might look crazy, but the 35-year-old fiberglass worker from Fern Bay says aerobatics is in fact very safe and all about precision. It's a bit like gymnastics or dressage. The pilots are judged on how well they execute set moves.
The general crowd doesn't matter if you're off a couple of degrees, but in the competition you have to be perfect.
Unusually, Paul won the unlimited class in a biplane.
A few people told us that we couldn't do it, so that was a good incentive for us to give it a go.
He's just one of several Action Aerobatics Club members based at Rutherford that brought home a trophy. Competition rookie Anthony Crichton-Brown won the graduate section. For the record, he's a Qantas pilot during the week.
There's no other aspect of aviation that I can think of where a pilot can be graded against his peers.
Just think of them as figure skaters in the skies. Penny Evans, NBN News.
Calling on the help of Andrew Johns this week, the Knights captain knows he hasn't been at his best when it comes to conversions. After showing promise at training, though, Gidley has received Newcastle coach Brian Smith's blessing to keep the goal-kicking duties, but it's in his role as fullback that Kurt's keen to impress, with Origin selection looming.
It's all about a week-to-week battle at the moment, and then when the time comes and they're picking the team, hopefully I've been playing well enough.
Meanwhile, Coach Smith has taken the peaceful option when it comes to Adam McDougall. Smith considered swapping the centre spots so Mad Dog would meet Wendell Saylor, but after a war of words between the two camps, he'll remain next to James McManus.
They've been building a nice combination over the last couple of seasons, so I think we'll just leave well enough alone there.
Today's storm clouds just couldn't keep the crowds away. Around 2,000 foodies descended on Tyrrell's winery, enjoying everything the Hunter has become famous for. There's a very simple reasoning behind holding the festival now in its 8th year.
It's just our way of saying, hey, we make the best Semillons in the world. Come up here, give them a try.
34 wineries set up stores today, all intent on doing more than just spruiking their harvest.
There's still, believe it or not, lots of people out there that have never tried our wines, so it's a great opportunity to show our wares, and that has a flow-on effect down the track.
But the festival isn't just about gorging. There's also wine and cooking masterclasses where the valley's famous vignerons and chefs divulge a few of their secrets.
I think gone are the days where people go home and they just cook meat and 3 veg, so it's something that I've been doing a long time, and if I can inspire people to cook them, that's great.
But the crowds at Bucolban were nothing compared to those at Steamfest. Over the weekend, that event is expected to attract more than 50,000 train enthusiasts. The bike trails around the Glenrock State Recreation Area are generally regarded as some of the best in the city, but after years of use they need work, as do some of the horse and bushwalking tracks. Identifying just what needs improving and protecting over the next 10 years is what the Glenrock Management Plan is all about.
One of the things that the last plan of management failed to do was address mountain bike access in particular, and it's a recreational use that has increased markedly over the last 5 to 10 years.
The new plan proposes creating 14 kilometres of bike track with another 20 kilometres worth of fire trails in the park's north. Rangers today spoke with park users about the draft, but overall everyone seemed pretty pleased.
Any improvement is good, so we're happy, and we walk here every Saturday. We love the bush.
In the time that we've been walking down there, there's been a lot of improvements.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
Crews had trouble staying upright in wind gusts of up to 28 knots. Once the starting siren sounded though, just try stopping them.
Starting's been a difficulty, but we seem to be quick downwind, and I think the boat's quick, so been happy with that.
Skipper Sam Nugent and crew Josh McKnight, both from the Manly Club, really set the standard and pace over the 4 days, winning the overall Aussie title from an eclectic field.
There's so many different types of boats and so many people.
It really is anything goes at these championships, from skiffs to cats, pairs and singles. And how's this for standing out? Matthew Wilmot from the Northern Beaches was the sole windsurfer, which also makes him champion in his class. Offshore, 17 yachts started the Pittwater to Newcastle race this morning in a sun-soaked Broken Bay. Among the bigger boats, Antipodes made an early charge through the heads before the weather changed, overtaken by Sydney yacht The Real Thing, which hit the Hunter first in 4 hours 55 minutes. Many set out again tomorrow morning for the race to Port Stephens.
Family and friends of the deceased came to Stockton Cemetery to survey the damage, which occurred on Friday night and was discovered late yesterday. Pat Keating visits the final resting place of her husband and several of her friends on a regular basis.
It's a holy place. It's quiet, it's lovely, and you can sit down and think of the past and how good things were.
She says the community is sick of this kind of behaviour.
Last year they broke the cenotaph rifle. Now they're up here attacking the graves, and it is insulting to the people in Stockton.
Police agree now they're asking for the public to name and shame the vandals.
Well, as far as police are concerned, we consider it to be a despicable and low act, and we would very much like to catch the offenders.
The people who do things like this are the lowest strata of society.
Meanwhile, 3 men were in police custody at Belmont Station late this afternoon after a house was set alight in Charlestown early this morning. Just before 7 a.m, 3 men drove to a property in James Street. 2 men then approached the front of the premises and doused the veranda with an accelerant. The front of the building was then set alight before the 3 men fled the scene.
A short time later, they were apprehended by Highway Patrol from Lake Macquarie.
Charges are expected to be laid. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
Obviously all her beautiful tiger moths live here, as well as many, many friends, and she flew with these guys for years and they're like family for her. Today was a family day, all about sending Nan off and giving her a true aviator's farewell.
Training is always better after a win, and the Knights are getting used to that.
Well, it's 3 wins on the trot now, and I can't remember the last time I've been here that we've done that. So, you know, sport's all about confidence and belief, and we're starting to get a little bit of that. So it's very exciting times for us.
Confidence has never been a problem for McDougall or Wendell Saylor, and their showmanship all week ended the way it began, in jest.
Most of the people there to see me and the Dell go at it, and, you know, I don't think we disappointed. It was quite good.
On the injury front, Matt Hilda had x-rays today to check for a possible break in his hand, while Zeb Taylor joined him after taking a knock to an elbow. But all players will now enjoy a 2-day break. No rest for coach Brian Smith today, though, as he kept an eye on Wes Nguama. The centre continued his return from a long-term leg injury with Nilson Bay in the Newcastle Rugby League. But he'd barely touched the ball, and Macquarie had run in the first 2 tries. Simon Osborne returned serve with the front rower running more like a halfback. But it was the home side which dominated, taking a 22-10 half-time lead. That margin was quickly erased, care of 3 tries to open the second stanza as the Marlins hit the front by 2. But Matt Nicole promptly put pay to any comeback, picking up 4 of his own to equal the club record for tries scored in a game and get the Scorpions home.
Aristotle the Python is one of the star attractions of the holiday program, which educates children about some scary creatures in a fun way. The Junior Ranger program is run 4 times a year during the school break, teaching youngsters what they should do if they come across snakes, frogs, cockroaches, spiders, or in this case, a blue-tongue lizard.
In the good old days, we used to go and catch our own spiders and snakes just for fun, and now it's all about education, so yeah, I think it's very important.
Despite injecting around 3,500 into Blackbutt Reserve this holiday alone, the program is under threat as Newcastle City Council attempts to reel in a $12.7 million deficit. The future of the reserve's animal exhibits also hang in the balance.
So it was built for the people, and I think if ever removed, it should be the people's decision to remove it, not the councillors. They're not speaking for the people as far as I'm concerned on this issue.
Colleen West, NBN News.
We've put an alert out for the next 72 hours. We think this swell's going to be quite big, and notice there's red flags on all the Newcastle City beaches at the moment. So yeah, just exercise care. Inland pools and ocean bars will be the best place to have a swim.
It takes weeks to set up, but by lunchtime today there was barely a trace of yet another successful Steamfest. Several factors saw visitor numbers down slightly on last year, but the event was still hailed as a success.
We had a little bit of inclement weather, plus we're clashed with the Royal Easter Show, the second weekend of the Royal Easter Show, so we knew our numbers would be down. Traditionally they are on the Royal Easter Show weekend.
It's estimated Steamfest injects more than $2 million into the local economy, so it's not surprising organisers are thinking big for next year's 25th birthday celebration.
Twice the size, twice the time frame, but there are a lot of dominoes to put in line yet, but it's happening.
Discussions will now be held with several different rail-related organisations, including coal companies, in an attempt to stage a unique demonstration.
It's never been done in the world before, but we'd love to run 4 trains parallel out of Newcastle. We've done 2 trains. There's some significant issues in it, but we've got 4 railway lines, so why can't we have 4 trains?
And for the record, the 3830 steam locomotive narrowly beat home a Tiger Moth in yesterday's great train race from Hanbury Junction to East Maitland. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News. It takes weeks to set up, but by lunchtime today there was barely a trace of yet another successful Steamfest. Several factors saw visitor numbers down slightly on last year, but the event was still hailed as a success.
We had a little bit of inclement weather, plus we're clashed with the Royal Easter Show, the second weekend of the Royal Easter Show, so we knew our numbers would be down. Traditionally they are on the Royal Easter Show weekend.
It's estimated Steamfest injects more than $2 million into the local economy, so it's not surprising organisers are thinking big for next year's 25th birthday celebration.
Twice the size, twice the time frame, but there are a lot of dominoes to put in line yet, but it's happening.
Discussions will now be held with several different rail-related organisations, including coal companies, in an attempt to stage a unique demonstration.
It's never been done in the world before, but we'd love to run 4 trains parallel out of Newcastle. We've done 2 trains. There's some significant issues in it, but we've got 4 railway lines, so why can't we have 4 trains?
And for the record, the 3830 steam locomotive narrowly beat home a Tiger Moth in yesterday's great train race from Hanbury Junction to East Maitland. Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
Just 18 games into his first grade NRL career, and Junior Sowers already racked up 10 tries, many of them through simple brute strength. His sudden rise up the ranks since his debut midway through last season has even caught his captain on the hop, but the man himself reckons there's more to go yet.
Personally myself, I still got heaps to learn, and my best footy hasn't come yet.
Desperate to earn New Zealand's selection, few doubt that time will come, and with the Anzac Test fast approaching, it's his club's form which could be the deciding factor if it's to happen this soon.
I think he's one of the form players in the comp. If we keep winning games, that's always a good indicator to try and get a start in one of those rep teams.
Good news today for both Matt Hilda and Zeb Taya, with X-rays clearing them of serious injury. Meanwhile, Wes Nguama is likely to be named in the night squad to play the Tigers after completing a full match for Nelson Bay yesterday. It was always expected that star Italian import Fabio Vignaroli would make his return from a hamstring injury this week, and another strong training session from him today only confirmed that. However, Jason Hoffman's inclusion in the squad for Wednesday's match against Japan's Nagoya Grampus was a surprise, given he's only just earned a medical clearance to play since a full knee reconstruction.
Physically, I feel perfect. I feel actually fitter than before because rehab was so tough. And mentally as well, the hardest thing's probably going into that first challenge.
I've got no doubt that as an impact for him coming on for the last 30, he definitely can cause some havoc.
Keiji Tamada did that the last time he played Newcastle. However, the injured marksman has remained in Japan for the return leg, and that only helps the home team's cause.
If a Japanese national team player is missing, I'm quite happy.
And confirmation today that 17-year-old Ben Kantorowski will leave for a week-long trip to Bayern Munich in Germany on Saturday, but will return in time for the Jets' next ACL game.
Business is booming at the Port of Newcastle. Last year, a record 93.3 million tonnes of trade worth $10.3 billion passed through the port, and this financial year it's expected to be even better.
In these tough economic times, the increase in coal on this time last year and again with grain coming on gives us very solid, strong numbers to indicate that we're going to have a good year.
73 million tonnes of products and produce has already gone through, with the port expected to ship a total of 96 million tonnes by the end of the 2008 to 2009 financial year.
These numbers certainly indicate the strength of the Port of Newcastle, but we don't just stop there. We're continuing to look for ongoing diversification and growth, even in the midst of a quiet time.
A break in the drought is partly behind the port's increased trade, with grain farmers in the state's north finally able to harvest a decent crop.
I think obviously things are settling down a little bit as to last year's harvest and the deregulation. I suppose people are starting to now get on top of it and having a look at how things can be exported out into the overseas countries.
Madeline Bond, NBN News.
When the government restructured rural lands protection boards into the mega livestock health and pest authorities earlier this year, it promised cost savings. However, many local property owners aren't seeing value for money after their farm rates skyrocketed. Woodville grazier and feed supplier Ross Hicks's rates more than doubled.
Cattle prices are probably as low as they've been. We're in an economic crisis, they tell us, and now we get hit with double the rate.
Farmers aren't just sitting on the fence. NBN News has spoken to a number of landholders so angry about rate rises of more than 150% that they're refusing to pay the bill. And they're not alone. There's a groundswell of opposition in other districts too, with some farmers even calling for the new authority to be disbanded. While Upper Hunter MP George Souris won't support a bill boycott, the Nationals have called for a moratorium on the hikes until the government explains the increase.
It's been a hoodwink by the government, and now these outrageous charges, up to 156% increase in rates, is breaking the camel's back.
Former Hunter RLPB Director Patricia Betzick says whatever the cost, frontline services must be maintained, given looming retrenchments.
Particularly the district vet, the pest animal ranger and the reserves ranger are there and accessible to the ratepayers.
Penny Evans, NBN News.
We'd much prefer to train people in safety beforehand, and that the virtual reality and the increase in quality of the training facilities here allows us to do that in a far more efficient way.
I think there are probably only 4 civil engineers in this country who've been elected to the Academy of Science, by my reckoning anyway. So it's a distinct honour.
Julie Holdsworth and her family have been holidaying at Lake Macquarie for years. Until now, they've never had a close encounter with a shark. That was until these school holidays. The family shot these pictures over the Easter weekend between Wangi and Pulbur Island.
Well, this is the first time that we've seen, but like I said, Christmas time we heard there were sharks around this area.
18-year-old Corey was in a boat on his own when they made the sighting.
Definitely when I was out in the tinny by myself, and it pops up right next to me, then yeah, it's definitely a little bit of fear there.
But the family won't let fear keep them out of the water.
It's always in the back of your mind, but it's never really slowed me down at all. Like, we came back from seeing a shark and went straight back out there.
We still water ski and canoe and whatever, so no one's actually been bitten by a shark so far, so hopefully we won't be the first.
Just 2 months ago, we ran a story on another shark sighting, this one filmed off Murray's Beach by keen angler Paul Flaherty. The Mayor says it isn't cause for concern.
If there are more sharks in the lake, it would seem to be because there is more food for them. So it looks like the whole food chain has actually improved.
Mitchell Hughes, NBN News.
He was king of the kids today, but Ben Cross has been like a rock for the Newcastle pack this season. After an injury-riddled debut year at the club, Cross has played all 6 games this season and likes what he sees from a pack steadily rebuilding an old reputation.
As everyone always talks about, the Knights old boys and the 88 and 89 sort of defence, and hopefully we can sort of emulate them.
The Dragons felt the full force of the Knights at the weekend, and all players know that. Now comes the consistency part.
You want to be regarded as a tough forward pack, and teams, when they come up against you, they know they're going to be in for a tough game.
Contracted for this season and the next, Cross feels the time will soon be right to launch talks in terms of a extension. And considering his form of late, that spells good news for a team he feels is building towards something big.
Another couple of years are really mature, and hopefully it won't take that long to get to a premiership, maybe this year or next year, but that's how it takes. It takes about 5 years to build up to a premiership, and they're going on the right track.
It was an extended 20-man squad named today to play the Tigers, which included Scott Giroux and Wes Nguama, both on the bench. Only 2 points separate 4 sides in Newcastle's group, and a win against Nagoya tomorrow night could see the Jets open an important gap, given the top 2 teams will advance.
We know the importance of this game. And for us to progress to the next stage, it's imperative for us to get a good result. I think it'll go right down to the wire with this group, especially how evenly it's poised at this moment.
Both sides have battled disruptions, but with Nagoya caught balancing both club and ACL commitments, they arrived in Newcastle without key marksman Tamata, but with Brazilian striker Davi, who's in red-hot form, and much will rest on his shoulders.
Of course, everybody is waiting for Davi to score, but sometimes it's not easy, because he's always under hard marking.
Just how this game will be played style-wise will rest largely on the state of the playing surface at Energy Australia Stadium, which is affected by both weather and the rugby league season. What both teams expect, though, is Newcastle to maintain its physical approach.
Not only physically, how people like to say, Australian team, they play physically and etc. etc. No, they know to play. Yeah?
If we got told that we're to play Nagoya in the car park, we'd be up for it.
It's a story about rediscovering who you are, but it uses magic and circus and acrobatics and things to tell the story.
For the past 5 weeks, Peter Zwolsman has been searching the internet for a job 5 times a day. But despite his efforts, the forklift driver has been unable to secure work.
It's frustrating. I normally find work, but with this latest environment, like the recession, it is very hard.
The Jesmond man is listed with 5 recruitment and job finding agencies as well as Centrelink, but says the market's so tight he's not had a single call. Australian Bureau of Statistics figures show 3,200 jobs were lost in the region in the last month alone, while a Hunter Business Chamber survey found 1 out of 4 businesses is having trouble securing finance, while 2 out of 5 have reported deteriorating business conditions. Today, the Federal Employment Participation Minister met with Newcastle MP Sharon Grierson and employment service workers to discuss implementing the government's new employment program in the area by the 1st of July. As it sits now, the Hunter's unemployment rate is 6.8%, slightly lower than the state's rate of 7%, but over the nation's average of 6.1%. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
I said to State Council that this was an intolerable situation, that I felt that there was no justification for such large increases.
This empty wool shed in Hannell Street will be transformed into a bustling marketplace if Newcastle Jets owner Con Constantine gets his way. Last night, the Lord Mayor John Tate used his casting vote to approve changing the city's LEP to facilitate the project. That move has attracted criticism. 2 years ago, Mr Constantine made a donation to the Lord Mayor's state election campaign, but Mr Tate says that had nothing to do with his support of the market.
My process has been absolutely transparent and I wouldn't want it any other way. Now, people saying that I cannot have a vote in this because of that, I've met the obligations and the obligations are to declare it.
He says the project could create 1,200 jobs.
Why would we reject an opportunity to look at a job increase in this area?
It seems his sentiment has support.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good idea.
Sure, don't see why not.
That might be good for the community. Markets are a great thing.
Maryville would be the most appropriate place.
But of course, Council's decision doesn't mean the project will go ahead. It still has to go through public consultation and a development application phase.
Well, these olives here are ripening very nicely at the moment. This is where we want them, just turning green, just to a sort of pale yellowy green. But if we leave them much longer, we have a chance of fungal disease.
Anthracnose virtually wiped out last season's harvest, but so far that looks unlikely to be repeated in 2009.
The quantity will be up. It's certainly a much better crop than we had last year, and the quality is very good as well.
1/3 of the way through, it's too wet to bring machine harvesters onto the groves, so people power is the only way to pick the fruit. While it limits damage to the trees, financially it isn't the best option.
If you can use shakers, you actually break even. If you have to handpick, you're biting the bullet and saying, there's always next year.
Oil varieties make up 70 to 80% of the harvest, but these jumbo calamatas are prime table fruit.
Because of our summer rainfall, we do very well with table olives.
Although wine is the Hunter Valley's calling card, olives can hardly be considered just a boutique industry anymore. Established about 15 years ago, there are now more than 250,000 trees growing in this region.
We're not quite as established as those guys who have had 3,000 years practice, but we're getting there.
Penny Evans, NBN News.
Essentially, this is about drawing our attention to the waste, drawing our attention to the unnecessary purchasing and consumption of water when we have clean water supplies here.
If actions speak louder than words, then those from James McManus have been deafening, and Blue selectors have been listening.
He's a great dummy half runner. He hasn't got 1 ounce of fear in him. You know, he turns up when your team really needs him. Mate, all those things to me sound like an Origin player.
His fellow teammates and myself have been very proud of the way he's played over the past couple of years, and he's been a big improver and he's just a really consistent player.
McManus has established himself on the wing outside Adam McDougall, who feeds the Flying Scotsman on the field and off it.
You know, really
listen to a lot of what he has to say and a lot of the advice that he gives out and a lot of the plop that he tosses up as well.
It's a massive shot of confidence going into Sunday's match against the Tigers, and no one can accuse Wes Nguama of not pulling his weight. He's been featuring for Nelson Bay in the local league, and if not for the program, wouldn't have been playing at all.
Whatever they don't make up in pace, it's definitely as much as aggressive anyway. The boys really dig in and really go for each other in the field. But yeah, mate, it's a good standard of football and one that I'm enjoying.
He admits, though, his comeback from a leg injury has been frustrating, but one almost over, likely to make his return for the Knights on the bench this Sunday. A former Socceroo, Angelo Costanzo came to the Jets from Adelaide last month, yet his pedigree on the pitch would be no guarantee of game time until now.
I've got nothing to prove. I'm just going out there to play, you know, that's what I love doing. I'm a bit nervous actually, because I haven't played. It's like starting over again for me, but yeah, I'm pretty confident that I can do the job.
And what a job they'll have, especially without Hartman, Lubo Milicevic and Adam Depuzo. Costanzo played his first match for the Jets in a trial against the Central Coast last week. Otherwise, he's watched every other game from the bench, taking it all in to keep Nagoya out.
They are very dangerous from set pieces, and that was the only chance they really had last week, you know, from scoring from set pieces. So we're going to try and cut them out and not give any silly fouls around the edge of the box.
A win this evening would see the Jets leapfrog Nagoya Grampus, which is leading the group by 1 point. Last night in Japan, it was miserable all round for the Mariners as Kawasaki Frontale took the early lead through Juninho. When Matt Simons scored the equaliser, though, the trip north suddenly seemed worth it for the Mariners faithful until this late strike sunk the Central Coast 2-1.
The attitude is great in that once the game's over, you just sit down with all these players that you've played against with and for and have a quiet drink and go back over the old times.